Court of Iowa in Fort Scott County is now in session. The Honorable Judge Tilling presiding.
Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. Okay, good morning, everyone. Let the record reflect that we are here in the matter of the state of Iowa versus Madison Russo in criminal cause number FECR 427672. We are here for sentencing this morning. Ms. Russo is present and represented by Andrea Yeager. The state is represented by County Attorney Kelly Cunningham. My review of the file reflects that Ms. Russo previously appeared and withdrew her plea of not guilty and entered a plea of guilty to theft in the first degree in violation of Iowa Code Section 714.11, 714.12, and 113, and also 714.2 paren 1, and Iowa Code Section 702.9 paren 1. The court at that time ordered a pre-sentence investigation and set this matter for sentencing today. Ms. Yeager, have you had an opportunity to review the pre-sentence investigation report with your client, and are there any additions or corrections to the report?
We've had an opportunity to review, Your Honor. We have no additions or corrections.
Are there any motions pending or reasons why sentencing should not take place at this time?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you, counsel. Ms. Cunningham, does the state have a recommendation?
Yes, Your Honor, I do. With respect to the charge of theft in the first degree, a Class C felony, the state is going to recommend that Ms. Russo be committed to the Director of Adult Corrections for an indeterminate term not to exceed 10 years, with that period of time being suspended and with the court placing her on a period of probation for 2 years. I would further note that Ms. Russo certainly is an appropriate candidate for a deferred judgment, and the state would not be resistant to that. I'm going to walk the court basically through an analysis of this case so that the court is familiar with all of the facts and circumstances and variables that were taken into consideration for purposes of any recommendation that was or that is being made, and even a request in support of a deferred judgment. I would further note that with respect to the charge of theft in the first degree, that carries a statutory fine of $1,375. Now, with that being said, when this case was initially presented to the Scott County Attorney's Office, and I, as the prosecutor, had an opportunity to review the facts of the case, I will say that it was difficult to conceive how a young lady of Miss Russo's age would find herself in the situation that she was in, having committed the crime. And when you stop and consider the facts and the circumstances of there being representations of having cancer, and there being a GoFundMe page set up with payments being made to that GoFundMe page to assist with the treatment of any type of medical expenses that would arise. It was disturbing. I've had an opportunity to go through, though, and review the pre-sentence investigation report, and I think that the pre-sentence investigation report really provided the insight that the state needed to understand how this particular crime came to be committed. There's a number of different factors that I've looked at as far as the recommendation that's been being made by the state, and I want just to express those to the court. First of all, I've been a prosecutor for 33 years, and I've seen a lot of criminal activity. Ms. Russo is an individual that is a high school graduate. One of the things that we were provided information about as far as her performance in high school, she performed very well and had very high grades. And then, of course, she is a young woman who is attending college and doing well in college as a young girl and even as a young woman. Another issue that I was interested in looking at is what has she done by way of employment and how has she contributed to society? And this is a young woman who has had a consistent employment history, which is something that we don't typically see in the individuals who come before the court. So we don't see individuals who are coming into court, who are taking steps to obtain an education, to improve themselves, to apply themselves, and to also actively work and be a contributing member to the community. The facts of this particular case show that that is certainly the circumstance with Ms. Russo. Other variables that I think are important for the courts to consider, and certainly had a lot of bearing in terms of the recommendation that I'm making. From the very beginning of this case, it wasn't a question of whether or not this was a case that was going to go to trial. Ms. Yeager, who represents Ms. Russo, came to me at the outset and indicated that Ms. Russo had wanted to take responsibility for this crime, and she was going to enter a plea of guilty, and that's exactly what had occurred. The discussions that were taking place between myself and Ms. Yeager was essentially what recommendation the state was going to make by way of a plea agreement. The state indicated that it would offer an open plea, but the state would certainly be very mindful of circumstances that would lend itself to recommending a suspended sentence or even the giving of a deferred judgment. Once, I had the opportunity to look at the facts and circumstances of this young woman's life, but also just to even look at her willingness to come forward and make victims whole. That was going to have a large bearing on the recommendation that I would make. Before the plea was entered, and let me see, yes, before the plea was entered, there had been steps taken to make the victims whole. There was an order that was entered on July 12th in this particular matter, where Ms. Russo actually came forward with all of the victim restitution that was owed, that currently is being held in trust in a bank account, and the total victim restitution was $39,385.79. Those monies have been paid and are being held by the clerk to be paid out to the victims once the sentencing is concluded. That really was something that was significant to the state, that this young woman had taken those steps. Now, I think that one would naturally ask the question of where those monies came from, but I think the information in the pre-sentence investigation report spoke to that particular issue. And I'm going to talk about those facts, because I wondered, how is it that Ms. Russo, with her background, would ever find herself in this circumstance, and then having gone through and reviewed the information that she provided to the author of the pre-sentence investigation report, it certainly helped the state to understand, the fact that she was talking about the dynamic within her family and her family pulling apart, how her family wasn't coming together, and her need to try and bring the family together, and that families tend to come together if, there's somebody who's struggling with an illness, and having utilized that as a means of bringing her family together. And then, unfortunately, it started on a path where she had described encouragement to set up a GoFundMe page, and then things spiraled out of control from that point forward, and how she felt sick every time there was a contribution made to the GoFundMe page, and she just wanted this circumstance to come to an end because she never had wanted it to develop to the extent where it had developed. That really helped the state to understand how, with her background, how this young lady ended up committing this crime. So, you know, I think there's been a lot of questions that have been out there. Those questions have been answered, and her willingness to take responsibility, her willingness to come forward and make the victims whole, certainly, I think, supports the suspended sentence or even the giving of a deferred judgment. I'd like to do a breakdown, if I could, Your Honor, for purposes of victim restitution too, so that we can articulate who those payments would be directed to.
Yes, I appreciate that. However, I'm just happen to be looking at is it as set forth in the order of July 12th already?
Yes, Your Honor, and so I have identified each of the 6 parties that those monies would go to. I've given a breakdown, and then that certainly would save some time here in the courtroom where I don't have to go through and articulate that.
Okay.
I would note that I do have 2 individuals who are here and who would like to make victim statements. One of the individuals is Margaret All. Mrs. All is from the Eldridge community, and that is where Madison is from. And then I have a Mrs. Rhonda Miles. She comes to us from down in the Tennessee area, I believe, and she is here on behalf of the Nikki, let me spell that for our record, Nikki Mitchell Foundation, and that's a cancer foundation. And so those 2 individuals would like to make statements to the court as well, Your Honor.
Okay. All right. Before I hear those statements, I take it that these individuals, the foundations that they represent, qualify as victims under this case because, well, they were victimized.
They had made contributions, so...
I think that's enough under the code.
Yes,
Okay, very good.
Yep,
Thank you.
absolutely, Your Honor.
Yes, and I believe also the code provides that they get the last word, so to speak.
Yes, and I did advise them procedurally how this process would work.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Does that conclude the state's comments?
It does, Your Honor.
Thank you, counsel. Ms. Yeager.
Your Honor, we would call Dr. Christina Pites to the stand.
Okay. Ma'am, could you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Please be seated up there. You may proceed, counsel.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Pites, could you state your name and spell it for the court reporter, please?
Christina Pites, P as in Paul, I-E, T as in Tom, Z.
And how are you employed?
I work contract. I'm a forensic psychologist.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background, training, and education that got you to your current position?
I have a bachelor's degree from Creighton University. I have a master's degree from Sam Houston State University. I have a doctoral degree from Texas A&M University. I completed my internship and postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Texas Medical School in Houston, Texas. I'm board certified in forensic psychology. I worked almost 25 years for the United States government. I'm now retired, and now I work contract completing forensic evaluations.
And your work for the federal government, was that within the Bureau of Prisons?
It was.
What was it that you were doing within the Bureau of Prisons for the federal government?
I completed forensic evaluations that were referred by federal judges throughout the United States. I also completed some military evaluations, and I also completed state evaluations that were death penalty evaluations that were in their federal appeal process, and they were referred to the United States Medical Center for evaluation.
Is it fair to say that you've had lots of experience with persons who are convicted of crimes and may potentially pose additional risks in the future?
It is.
And can you tell us what is a forensic evaluation?
Basically, what I'm doing is a general psychological evaluation, and I'm answering a legal question. Most of the evaluations that I've done are competency evaluations. I've done death penalty evaluations. I've done sanity evaluations. So I'm using my skills as a psychologist, and I'm applying them to answering a legal question.
Does part of your professional experience include assessing factors like amenability to rehabilitation and likelihood of recidivism?
Yes, so that would be called a risk assessment, and I've completed numerous risk assessments in my career.
Have you also had experience in providing expert testimony for district courts?
I have.
And what kind of cases have you generally testified in?
I've testified all over the United States in federal court, state court, military court, juvenile court, and family court. And as I testified to earlier, most of the evaluations that I've testified in are going to be competency cases. However, I've also testified in insanity cases. I've testified in risk assessment cases. I've testified in psychosexual evaluations where that's actually a risk assessment where I'm analyzing a sex offender and determining their future risk.
Do you also have any professional societies with which you're a member?
I do.
And have you published any articles or other publications?
I have.
Your prior testimony, is that primarily for government entities, the defense, or have you testified for both?
I've testified for both.
Is it fair to say that you're primarily focused on your science and discerning the truth as opposed to picking a side?
That's correct.
Is your background and qualifications, including your education, experience, training, publications, leadership positions, professional associations, all contained within your curriculum vitae?
Yes,
And you've provided a copy to myself as well as to the court, is that
I
right?
have. Yes.
Your Honor, that's what has been marked as Defense Exhibit A. May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
Dr. Pites, I'm handing you a copy of Defense Exhibit A. Could you just give that a quick skim and make sure that that's a true and correct copy of your CV?
It is.
And is that the most updated copy?
It is.
Your Honor, we move to admit Defense Exhibit A.
Any objection?
The state has no objection, Your Honor.
Okay, Exhibit A is admitted.
Dr. Pites, moving to this case in specific, how is it that you first became involved in Madison Russo's case?
I was asked to evaluate Madison, and she came to Springfield, Missouri. I'm from Springfield, Missouri, and she came to Springfield, Missouri, and I evaluated her at my office.
Prior to that evaluation, did you review any materials associated with the case?
I did.
And what materials did you review?
I reviewed Madison's history, her medical history. I reviewed the trial information, trial minutes regarding the allegations. That was before I actually interviewed her.
Did you perform any examination or testing or interview with Ms. Russo?
I did.
And what was that?
I interviewed her for approximately 4 hours. I administered 2 objective psychological tests, the personality assessment inventory, the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory -2. I also interviewed her mother, I interviewed her brother, and I also interviewed her sister.
Why is it that you engaged in those interviews and evaluations?
When you conduct forensic evaluations, it's imperative that you don't rely solely on the person that you're evaluating's report. It's important that you interview collateral sources to confirm or refute what the person has told you. Also, similar to what the prosecuting attorney said earlier in court, it helped me understand Madison and how Madison got to the point that she is at today.
Are those the kinds of materials that are typically relied upon by other experts in your field?
Yes,
Did you perform a risk assessment with Ms. Russo?
I did.
And what is a risk assessment?
Basically, I looked at what we call risk variables to determine if she met any of the criteria for a risk variable. I also considered protective variables. Those are things that we learn about a person that helps them to not engage in future risk behavior.
What's your overall purpose in utilizing the risk assessment? Why is that important to you as an expert?
Well, in sentencing, what we're determining is she at risk of engaging in similar behavior, and/or is she at risk in engaging in future criminal behavior? So the purpose of a risk assessment is to analyze those variables and ascertain what's her risk, basically.
Well, let me back up. What kind of risk factors are you looking for? What constitutes a risk factor?
So there's been a lot of research on risk assessments, and what we've learned is many of the things that the prosecutor talked about: educational history, employment history, substance abuse history, past criminal history, mental health history. Does she have a support system? What sort of family dynamics does she have? Those are all risk and/or protective factors that we're analyzing when we're conducting a risk assessment.
Did you note any risk factors in Ms. Russo's case?
There were two. One is she has a history of suffering from anxiety, and she received medication for that. She doesn't have a significant mental health history, so I would actually consider that more of a protective factor, but it's certainly something that I had to consider. And then her current charge. She has no criminal history. Prior to engaging in this behavior, she has no juvenile criminal history, no adult criminal history.
Did you note any protective factors in Ms. Russo's case?
There are numerous protective factors.
Can you note some of the ones that were important to you?
Many of the things that the prosecutor talked about: her educational history. She excelled in academics, and she continued to excel when she entered college. She has no childhood significant events. She wasn't sexually abused. She wasn't physically abused. Employment history. She's worked and engaged in lengthy employment. She's maintained stable employment. She has no substance abuse history. I'm not aware. I specifically asked her, have you used marijuana? Have you used methamphetamine, ecstasy, mollies? Many of the things that we see adolescents, young adults using. She has never, she has no substance abuse history. She has no criminal history. Her mental health history is minimal. Again, she suffered from anxiety. I think it was around age 14. And took medication for that. She didn't abuse her medication. I think she was prescribed Xanax, which is a medication frequently abused by individuals. And I'm not aware that she ever abused any of that medication. She has good family support. Her father supports her. Her mom supports her. Her siblings support her. All of those are protective factors for Madison. The other thing, and again, the prosecutor already alluded to this, she's taken responsibility for her behavior. I've evaluated thousands of criminals, probably close to 2,000 criminals in my career. This isn't a criminally minded individual. She didn't minimize her behavior. She didn't rationalize her behavior, and she's made herself whole. She's paid her restitution. She's accepted responsibility for her behavior. We don't see that in most criminals, even at sentencing. They tend to minimize or rationalize their behavior, and Madison hasn't done that, which again is another protective factor.
And why is that factor important, particularly that last factor that you noted, important to you in determining your risk assessment for likelihood of dangerousness or recidivism and amenability to rehabilitation?
What we know about criminals is when they don't take responsibility or they minimize responsibility, they're more likely to engage in future criminal behavior. When they take responsibility, they understand the dynamics of their behavior, and they're less likely to engage in that behavior in the future.
And are all of your opinions ones that you were able to form to a reasonable degree of psychological certainty?
Yes.
And what is your opinion of Ms. Russo's likelihood of recidivism?
She's at low risk.
What's your opinion about Ms. Russo's amenability to rehabilitation?
She's at high risk of engaging in treatment and being successful in treatment.
Is it your opinion that Ms. Russo would be an excellent candidate for supervision and probation in this case?
She would be, yes.
Is there any other factor or opinion that you've formed of note that I've not yet given you the opportunity to explain to the court?
No.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Counsel. Ms. Cunningham?
Your Honor, the state has no questions.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. You may step down.
Your Honor, at this time, we also have Defense Exhibit B and C, which are school records relating to Ms. Russo. Given the nature of those records, and I believe I did provide those to the court, I would ask to be able to file Exhibit B and C under seal.
Okay, B and C, they are, for the record, St. Ambrose University transcripts. Is that what they are?
B is, Your Honor, and then C is a certificate of award for schooling through St. Ambrose University.
Okay. Any objection from the state?
The state has no objection, Your Honor.
Okay. All right. I will admit those under seal. Very good. Ms. Yeager, continuing with the defense recommendation, do you have a recommendation as counsel for Ms. Russo?
I do, Your Honor. We are recommending the court accept the parties' 210 plea agreement, and I'm further recommending and asking the court to impose a sentence of a deferred judgment. In this case, Ms. Russo has made a terrible mistake, and she has been the first one to admit that from day one. Her priority at all times throughout the pendency of this case has always been to accept responsibility for her actions, to make amends to the community, to the persons that she harmed specifically, to the impact to organizations or individuals who are themselves suffering from cancer or fighting cancer or any other medical condition. The only way that she can display her genuine remorse and try to move forward is to do exactly that, move forward. And she's done that at every step of the case. She's pled guilty as charged. She has maintained the funds within her account, and every single penny has been paid back. In fact, that was in the works long before Ms. Russo entered a plea of guilty. She had a check in hand at the time of her plea. She will speak to the court as well to try to articulate in the way that she can as a very young woman her feelings, her absolute regret for her choices and her behaviors, and her hopes and desires to move forward, and hope that everyone, herself, her family, the community, anyone who may have been affected or harmed or may have been chilled from providing funds to organizations and things of that nature. She wants to express in the best way possible how sorry she is, and her regret for her choices, her regret for her actions, and any negative impact they may have had. I know that Madison would love to take this all back and undo the mistakes that she's made and the choices that she's made. Unfortunately, we don't have that capacity. And of course, she's a human who makes mistakes, and she's a very young person. At the time of the offense, she was 18 years old, so it's not an inaccurate description to call her a girl. She is a young woman now, but she was a girl at the time. She can only learn from these poor choices, and it has been a hard lesson. It's hard enough for any person to make mistakes. It's even harder when those mistakes are so severe and have the kinds of consequences personally to Ms. Russo in the form of the criminal justice system, certainly one major consequence, but also socially. Ms. Russo has had the kinds of consequences that the criminal justice system cannot and does not impose upon people, and she has done her best to persist through that and focus on her rehabilitation, focus on moving forward, focus on showing how truly sorry she is, and making amends in the only ways possible to her. Now, she can act as a deterrent, because of course deterrence is an important factor for the court at the time of sentencing, both in terms of general deterrence, in other words, deterrence to other persons, and specific deterrence, deterrence to Ms. Russo herself. I am absolutely confident that this court and no other court will ever see Ms. Russo again, and certainly not for an offense like this. But I'm also confident that Ms. Russo, if nothing else, her poor choices have had some positive impact through a deterrent effect. These kinds of cases are not altogether uncommon. This is not a one-off kind of case where medical issues or fraud or theft occurs. There are many other cases within this region where cases of this nature have happened. And to the extent that Ms. Russo can be a deterrent to anybody who may be considering these kinds of behaviors, these kinds of actions, then that's a positive. The nature and the circumstances of Ms. Russo are particularly important to us in her background. And as a legal matter, Iowa Code Section 901.5 provides the goals and the considerations for the court at the time of sentencing. The code focuses on two issues: providing a maximum opportunity for rehabilitation and the protection of the community from further offenses by the defendant and others. Those are the two issues that the code concerns itself. The code notably does not concern itself with morality or judgment, but more importantly, the code does not concern itself with only punishment. That is certainly a byproduct of sentencing, but it is not the primary goal that the law focuses upon. Deferred judgments do provide the maximum opportunity for rehabilitation for Maddie. She has been actively engaged in mental health treatment. She is currently actively engaged in mental health treatment. She does so regularly and frequently, and she has no desire or plan to stop at any time in the near future. She has been attending schools, the state very well articulated. She was a very good high school student. She graduated from high school. She's moved on to higher education. She's doing very well there. The court can see what her grades are like, the kinds of classes that she's taking. These are not fluff classes. These are real classes, and she's doing very well, earning A's. She has goals for the future. She wants to continue on to a master's degree. She's working. She has a history of working, despite the fact that she's only been a teenager. She's still very young, but she has consistently worked. She has worked good jobs. She has worked stable jobs because despite her youth, she is rather mature, and she is focused on the future and growing and being the best person and best community member that she can be. And with a deferred judgment, she would still be subject to the supervision of the court, the judicial branch, and I'm confident that Ms. Russo will shine in that regard. She will not be a pain for the probation office. She will check in appropriately, and she will do everything that is expected of her and requested of her. Moving to the protection of the community component, Ms. Russo has no criminal history, not even juvenile offenses, not truancy, nothing. She has no history of violence, certainly. There's no history in the pre-sentence report or otherwise in her evaluations or personal background of violence that didn't make it to the criminal justice system. She's not getting into fights at school. She's not, punching kids at the swing set or things of that nature. She has an extremely low likelihood of recidivism, both based on the science and the statistics that we know about, the characteristics for people with high likelihood of recidivism, and as testified to by Dr. Pites, who is very well qualified and has done thousands and thousands of these cases and worked with very serious and dangerous offenders. She has a high likelihood of amenability to rehabilitation, again, based on the considerations that we know about and based on Dr. Pites' expert opinion. By all objective measures, Ms. Russo is an excellent candidate for a deferred judgment. Certainly mistakes have been made, and that's how we got into the criminal justice system. That's how we got to a point of being before Your Honor for sentencing. But we can't undo those choices. We can only move forward. And moving forward, she has every indicator of future success, amenability to diversion, and likelihood of success with a deferred judgment. Normally, I would talk about strong community support, and it's true that Ms. Russo does have the privilege and the luxury of having family support and some social support. She's also earned herself stable housing. She's growing as a young woman and maturing, and getting her ducks in a row, if you will, to becoming an adult. But here, that's not to say that Ms. Russo has not had her own personal struggles. As alluded to by Dr. Peitz and by the state, there have been difficult emotional and psychological issues that Ms. Russo has handled with grace throughout her life. She's had a complicated and difficult family relationship, particularly with her mother. And many days, Ms. Russo felt that she was put in the middle of the family dynamic and the family struggles, that it was a pressure upon her to fix it, to fix the family. Whether that was real or imagined, that is how she felt. And as the state said, that is what led Ms. Russo to get to the position where she was now. She was not acting out of criminal propensity. She was not acting out of criminality. She was not acting out of greed or anger or a desire to harm specific people or organizations. She felt that she was in the middle, and that was the way to fix the family, to bring the family together like some sort of movie. That was the answer. Things very much spiraled out of control and snowballed from there, and the situation very much got away from her. At that point, it was too late to go back. She didn't know how to handle it. She, of course, is very young. Her brain is not fully developed. Her emotional and psychological maturity is not yet fully developed. She didn't know what to do. But since that time, there have also been days that she has struggled where her medications have been withheld from her, where she was thrown out of the home with nowhere to go, where she was threatened with additional consequences. She has not let those days and those issues break her. She's not let them become her excuse for further poor behavior and poor choices. She has handled it the best way that she can, and she has focused on, how do I move forward? How do I show how sorry I am? How do I grow from this? And that has always been her focus. It would have been very easy to use this as an excuse to say, screw it, I can do whatever, poor me, I'm the victim here. That has never, at any point in time, crossed Maddie's mind. That's never been her attitude. At the gym, for example, speaking of social issues, she's had people approach her and verbally accost her. She has been at the store where she's been flipped off and cursed at and yelled at. She has been threatened. Her family has been threatened. Online, she has received messages, and I'm not going to name these people because they don't deserve that, but I'll just quote two of them just to give an example of the kinds of things that Ms. Russo and her family have suffered since this. One person said, quote, "I hope someone brutally tortures you to death extremely slowly and live streams it." End quote. Another person said, quote, "You sick fuck. What's it like being the biggest piece of shit in the world? You fake ass cunt. Kill yourself. Kill yourself. You sick fucking bitch. You deserve to die." End quote. While it's understandable that there may be emotion and perhaps even outrage for Ms. Russo's choices, she is still a human being too. Her family are still people. She is still a young girl, and it is absolutely indefensible for someone to go out of their way to take specific action steps to target someone, to threaten someone, and to tell them to kill themselves, and that you hope that they are brutally tortured. That is indefensible, and it is a criminal act. Ms. Russo has made poor choices, and she has every hope to take full responsibility for those poor choices. But that does not make her or her family or anyone else in this world the subject of crime as though that is okay. That is not something that the criminal justice system tolerates. I know that's not something that the state tolerates. That's certainly not something that the defense tolerates. But that is important for this court to consider when it's considering how much has Ms. Russo gone through here as well, because that is still a sentencing consideration, and how much growth has she shown through this time, so that we can decide what is just punishment. Most importantly, it is important for the court to note that every single person has been made whole, and we're simply asking the court for an opportunity for Ms. Russo to show how sorry she is, to show that she can and will be successful in the community as a citizen and as an individual, as a young woman with a lot of promise and a lot of positive things going for her. We're asking the court to allow her to avoid the label and the consequences of being a felon, because she will avoid that if given the opportunity, because she can absolutely be successful. Your Honor, we'd ask you to impose a deferred judgment in this case.
Okay, thank you, counsel. Ms. Russo, now is your opportunity to tell me anything you wish me to consider before I impose judgment and sentence. And counsel, would you turn the microphone on, please? I believe the microphone is off currently.
Your Honor, first and foremost, I want to thank the court for the opportunity to speak today in front of you all. I have not spoken this entire time while my case was ongoing for several reasons, so this is difficult to talk about, but I'm just going to try my best. This experience, has been by far one of the most difficult things to navigate in my life. It has been very scary and challenging in more ways than one. I fully acknowledge that what I did was wrong, and I am incredibly sorry. If there was anything I could do to take it back, I would. The reality is that I can't. The only thing I can do is correct it, learn from it, and move forward. I beat myself up about it the whole last year in silence because I didn't know how to tell anybody what was going on. After January, I have continually beat myself up about it as well. I realize that I can't undo the past, but that doesn't mean that I still can't walk away from this experience as a better human and move forward. My goal now is to make amends in the ways I can, try to learn from my mistakes, figure out how I got myself here so I don't repeat this terrible mistake, and do what I can to turn this lesson into a positive, with the hope that I can make amends and hopefully positively influence the many people touched by my poor choices, cancer, or people mistakenly thinking about following in a similar mistaken path. A lot of people have made speculation as to why I did this and how somebody who looked like they had everything together could have such a mess. I didn't do this for money or greed. I didn't do this for attention. I did this in an attempt to try and get my family back together. I come from an extremely broken and separated family ever since I was 2 years old. Over the years, it has gotten steadily worse, and a lot has happened internally to our family. A family is supposed to be one that's drawn together, not drift further and further apart. I was always told that, quote, I was the only one that could fix it, and I have tried for years. Nothing was working, and I kept pulling for everybody to be a normal, functioning, loving, supportive family. I thought if I said what I said, it would make everybody pull together. It didn't work, and it only got worse. After that happened, I didn't know what to do. I couldn't tell anybody, and too many people knew already. From here, it all went downhill, and it snowballed quickly and hard. The way I went about this was not right, and I wish I would have sought out help regarding my family before making this immature decision. I was 18 years old, and I was a freshman in college when it took place. I'm young, and I don't know it all. I was not being rational. I have learned a lot from this experience, and I want to take this bad moment in my life and turn around and do good for society. I want this to reach an audience to say that it is okay if you are struggling and you need help. It is not a sign of weakness to say that you need help with something and you're not okay. I wish I would have done this a long time ago. It is also a reminder that everybody is silently battling something and you never know what is going on in somebody's life. Let this be a reminder to give each other more grace and compassion. Some might say I looked like I had it all together. I didn't. Instead, I had a situation I was stuck in a family that was, well, about as far from family as it can get. I had deep wounds I never learned how to heal from little on. I'm not afraid to admit that because it meant I finally learned how to heal from the inside out and realize that I am not God. I can't fix everything that is not in my control. All I can do is be a better version of myself every day, step by step. I have taken big steps to grow and learn from my choices and the things that have gotten me here. I have been engaged in counseling, and I plan to continue. I've also continued working. I am set to finish college in May and start an exciting new chapter in my career that I feel fortunate to have. In the future, I want to go back to school and get my master's. But most importantly, I want to create my own family someday. I want to break this cycle of how I grew up. And I wanted to make a family that I wish I had. One full of love, belongingness, support, cheerful gatherings at holidays and celebrations, and a cohesive unit. God willing, I pray for this. I also pray for all of those that were hurt by my irrational decision. I pray for the damage that has resulted from my actions and any harm or disrespect I caused or showed to anyone battling cancer, touched by cancer, or fighting to help people with cancer or other medical issues. Your Honor, I'm a good kid. I know I am still a good person. I have a lot to give to this world, and I don't give up. I would do anything to take back what I did. Again, I am so terribly sorry. This is something that I will have to live with for the rest of my life when I look at myself in the mirror. But I know it doesn't define me. It's not what mistakes we have done that determine our character, but instead how we respond to them and how we move forward from them in the future that shows our true character and resilience. My future gives me hope, and I am determined to make it the best I can. I ask for forgiveness and a second chance.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Russo. Ms. Cunningham, the first victim representative that would like to speak, I believe there was someone from the Oll Foundation?
Margaret Oll
Okay.
is present. And Mrs. Oll, would you like to stand and give your statement?
Yes.
Sure, absolutely. And Your Honor, do you want to go ahead and have them get on the witness stand? Would that be better?
Yeah, I think it would. Yeah. Please proceed when you are ready, Ms. Olds.
My name is Peggy Oll. Margaret is my given name. And I, first of all, just feel kind of betrayed by the Scott County Attorney's Office coming here. So I just wanted to say that first. I wrote this letter on February 2nd of this year. On April 27th, 2016, my husband Brent was diagnosed with cancer in his pancreas, liver, lungs, and his hip bone. After hoping and praying it was any other cancer besides pancreatic cancer, our very worst fear became reality. He had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. He was 48 years old, and we had 2 boys, 9 and 12. The oncologist sat us down and told us to get our affairs in order. For 4.5 months later, four and a half months later, after 2 trips to MD Anderson in Houston, Texas, and rounds of chemo, on August 27th, Brent was gone. The man I married and loved, the man who was the father of my boys, the man I said I would be there for in sickness and in health was gone. Our life together was gone forever. While he was sick, he was incredibly brave, strong, and so kind and thankful to everyone who helped him through his short battle. He said thank you to every nurse and doctor who took care of him. He never got angry, and he fought like crazy to live. He wanted so much to live. Even writing brings all the feelings back of how much he wanted to live and how hard he fought to be there for our boys. My heart was broken. Brent was an anesthesiologist and took care of thousands of people over his career. He was very much loved by his colleagues, partners, and pretty much all of the staff at the different hospitals he worked. He was loved by his family and his friends. When he got sick, it was overwhelming how many people reached out to our family to help us. As gifts, food, and sometimes money were given to us, we felt so overwhelmed with the love and support that was hard to even comprehend. Those 4.5 months are impossible to even describe. But through it all, I made a vow to myself that I would never, ever forget. And I would keep track, and I kept track as best as I could and wrote thank yous as the gifts came to us. Watching your big, strong partner in life lose his life and telling your kids Dad has gone to heaven changes you forever and ever. A few months after Brent was gone, a few nurses that Brent worked with organized the Stroll for Ole. It was a walk, run, and the money raised, which was about $17,000, was given to Pancreatic Cancer Action Network, PanCan, in Brent's memory. My boys and I walked in this event. I couldn't believe how many people showed up and participated. It wasn't long after that some of the nurses started talking about doing something annually. I felt compelled to get involved because if they were going to do something, I wanted to be a part of it. Well, that was the very beginning of the Dr. Brent Ole Strong Pancreatic Cancer Support and Awareness Fund. With the help of nurses, friends, and the Trinity Health Foundation, we set out to start what was initially a $50 gift card to those diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. But it grew quickly and became a $500 Visa gift card given to anyone diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in our greater Quad City area. We could reach out approximately 72 miles from the Quad City area. I stretched how much I wanted this to be a gesture of love and kindness, to let people diagnosed know that they weren't alone and that people cared about them. I wanted it to feel kind of like how Brent and I felt when people helped us. I stressed how I really wanted the process to be easy. Because people diagnosed with pancreatic cancer often don't have the time to fill out an application or ask for help. They can get so quick, fast. With the help and support of many people, this grew so that we could give these gifts out at both Unity Point Hospital and Genesis Hospital. And now we give them out at the University of Iowa as well. Sometimes by word of mouth, I would find out about someone, and along with someone from our team, we would deliver these gift cards to people diagnosed with pancreatic cancer or families who had lost somebody to pancreatic cancer. But because it happened so fast, their loved one had already lost their battle. I've devoted a great deal of my life to this effort and tried to give back to patients diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Our boys, who are now 16 and 19, have gotten involved in our fundraising and our cause. Their football teams help at our fundraiser. Our boys proudly wear the Oldstrong t-shirt and sweatshirts from our past years. This is their dad's legacy. It means so much to them as well. Sometimes people would contact me and tell me about a friend of theirs that was recently diagnosed. Countless times it was by word of mouth that I would find out about someone, and I would be sure our packet got to them. I wanted to give them a little bit of what was so generously given to us when Brent was sick. I never imagined someone so callously would fake they had such a devastating cancer as pancreatic cancer and willingly accept our gift of love and kindness and lie directly to my face. My heart was broken in disbelief. My oldest son found out about it while at school when his teacher, who gave to the GoFundMe, heard about her arrest and put her mugshot up on the screen in the classroom. My son was wearing his Oldstrong shirt that day with her name on it. He got home from school. I told him that she was in jail, and he said, "Good." I gave her our packet without thinking twice. I checked up on her over the course of the year. I asked how she was doing and asked if she wanted to go get coffee or something. She turned me down each time. She finally did agree to come to our fall Iowa tailgate fundraiser, which was last year. That was last year's event. Brent loved the Hawkeyes and tailgating. She wore our Oldstrong sweatshirt that had her name on it and many other people who'd also fought pancreatic cancer's name on it. Many of them died. She took pictures with me, the Oldstrong team, and other recipients of our Oldstrong gift, families who lost loved ones to pancreatic cancer. She took a picture with my late husband's dad. She stood at our event knowingly lying about her cancer. Is really unbelievable. She stood in front of me with her wig on, knowing she wasn't sick at all. Now, after all this has come out, I've lost sleep over how she could possibly do this. Why did she choose pancreatic cancer? I knew of her mom as she graduated from high school with Brent. They shared the same birthday, and her mom lived in Eldridge. Did she choose this cancer on purpose because of Brent's fund? I've questioned myself for not getting something in writing stating her diagnosis, but I'd never done that before with anyone who was from our small town of Eldridge. I knew who her mom was. I've questioned myself for giving her name to our local North Scott Press paper to do an article about her and 2 other Oldstrong recipients as a way to bring more awareness to pancreatic cancer and to let people know about our fundraiser. I feel terribly guilty for lending any sort of legitimacy to her story. I feel terrible that her name is now somehow tied to Brent's amazing legacy. Thinking about this consumed me and physically wore me out. I felt personally responsible for giving her our Oldstrong packet and giving her name to the North Scott Press. I feel incredibly betrayed and angry. As a result of her betrayal, we are now going to have to look more closely at how we give out these packets. My feeling of giving our Dr. Brent Oldstrong pancreatic cancer support and awareness packets to pancreatic cancer patients in memory of Brent is going to be restrained and restricted, and I'm so sad for that. I want it to be so easy and to be free to give our gift of love and support. I'm heartbroken that Maddy Russo did this. I hope Maddy Russo is held responsible. I hope Maddy Russo has to spend a great deal of time in jail. I hope Maddy Russo has to pay restitution. She preyed on my emotions and my giving nature. She used my husband's legacy and our fund to better her story and to lend legitimacy to her fake cancer story. Thank you. And I brought a sweatshirt from our last year's fundraiser, and it has her name all over all of our merchandise from last year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Your Honor, the state would call Rhonda Miles.
Good morning, Ms. Miles. Please have a seat. Please proceed, Ms. Miles.
I want to reiterate what Peggy said. I do also feel a little bit of a betrayal. I just feel like I watched the prosecuting side turn into the defending side. So I just want to say that also. My name is Rhonda Miles, and I am the founder and president of the Nikki Mitchell Foundation in Nashville, Tennessee. In 2013, I lost my best friend, Nikki Mitchell, to pancreas cancer after a 31-month fight. She was strong, resilient, and handled this disease with more grace than I've ever seen. I watched the trauma, the emotional, physical, and psychological effects that she endured. I walked in on her more times than I can count, sitting cross-legged on her bed with feeding tubes, pain pumps, weighing 85 pounds, with tears in her eyes and not a hair on her head, doing what she did best. She was praying, not only for herself, but also for those that she met during chemo and the friends and family that she'd be leaving behind. I was one of those prayers. That vision never leaves me, and I can guarantee you it was not staged or manufactured in any way, shape, or form. She had more integrity, honesty, compassion, bravery, and empathy than anyone I know. These are qualities that Madison Russo either was not instilled with or just does not embody. We're a small organization, and the biggest thing our organization is known for is our patient assistance, financial and emotional. We had patients on the waiting list while we were working with Madison to try to get her records so we could help her. Real patients, patiently waiting. I used a precious ask. Madison, I used to ask with the world's best pancreas surgeon to get you a second opinion. And that's hard to get. And you took that precious ask away from a deserving pancreas cancer patient. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. We provide Atlanta's Piedmont Health pre-surgical patients and their caregivers weekly Zoom support sessions with clinicians, patient, and caregiver ambassadors who we train. Watching the people on these sessions as they tell their stories is heartbreaking and at other times can be joyful. Bi-weekly, we have another Zoom session for those in all stages. That session is extremely difficult to get through because it's all stages of the disease and some have no hope. We connected Madison and her mother, Peggy, for emotional support with other patients and family. It's traumatic to retell your story, and patients open their hearts to someone going through the same thing. Madison manipulated, lied, and let these patients willingly pull the Band-Aid off their wounds one more time in the name of supporting a fellow patient. What Madison Russo did was devastating in so many ways. I'm also including anyone who helped her or who even knew what she was doing and didn't stop it. We've wasted precious time and resources on this scam when we could have been with someone in real need. When talking to potential donors, as an organization, Madison Russo has become the face of pancreas cancer, and I want to thank you for that. Not our real patients, not Ruth Bader Ginsburg, not Representative John Lewis, not Patrick Swayze, Steve Jobs, or Alex Trebek, but Madison Russo. I hate you're even in the conversation. I just returned last week from our largest fundraiser and had multiple donors ask about your horrible act, what you did, and what I thought your sentence would be. Quite honestly, my answer was, look at her. She's the picture of privilege as we're continuing to see in our country. I pray for justice for the ones truly battling, but I expect another travesty. And after hearing today, I really expect that. I've heard that there's those who think you've paid enough. You can't get a job, people looking at you differently, harassing you with veiled death threats. All I can think is, so? There are thousands of pancreas cancer patients who can't go to work, are looked at differently, and only 10% escape death within 5 years. Now here's my ask from the court. Madison to be sentenced to time in a long probation that includes community service in the cancer world, a world she obviously has no respect or compassion for. I disagree with you when you said that this could be a deterrent. A slap on the wrist is not a deterrent to others. It's a green light. It's an absolute green light. Madison needs to remember karma's real and can be brutal. Cancer is real and is brutal, and it's all around us. And what's going to happen if Madison or her family really do get a diagnosis? Will we believe? I doubt it. Impact on a life. It's all we can hope to do in this world is have impact, positive impact on lives. Nikki Mitchell had more impact than anyone I've ever known. I had a career, and when she died, I left that career to start a foundation and for no pay for 7 years. I make $20,000 a year now on an organization that's raised almost $5 million. Nikki made impact. You need to remember what impact really looks like. Your Honor, thank you for letting me sit up here and be the voice for 60,000 people who truly get diagnosed every year. I appreciate it.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, Ms. Russo, ma'am, in sentencing you, it is my duty under the law to look at the seriousness of the crime, the effect that the crime has upon members of the community, your willingness to accept change in treatment, and what's available to me in the community to assist you in that process. The law directs that I do look at the least restrictive alternatives first and then proceed to the more restrictive alternatives. I consider what an appropriate rehabilitative plan for you would be, but I also must protect the interest of the public. In this case, the interest of the public is in having people with the idea that they can donate to charities without the fear of it being a scam. I have reviewed the pre-sentence report and have, of course, considered all of the information in that report. That report indicates that there are a number of good things about you. You have no prior criminal history. You came from a home while your parents were divorced, but you did apparently come from a loving home. You are not subject to any abuse. You were involved in activities and had many friends. You graduated from high school with a GPA of 3.7. You enrolled in St. Ambrose and graduated, or not graduated, but you were on the dean's list each semester with a GPA of no less than 3.66. At the time of your arrest, you were employed by Deere & Company, I believe in product marketing as an intern. In short, I see little about your background that would indicate that you had not learned any better growing up, nor did I see any dire need for money. There was no substance abuse, no drug addiction. I think it is appropriate to briefly summarize the facts. On February 10, 2022, you began an elaborate scheme which involved you supposedly having pancreatic cancer and acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Through this scheme, you deceived your friends, your family, your community, other cancer victims, charities, and strangers who were motivated by your supposedly tragic story to donate to you to help support you through your disease. Most of these donations went into a GoFundMe account. Your scheme continued for a very lengthy period of time. You raised in excess of $39,000 from over 400 donors. I learned today that with Ms. Oles and her foundation, you appeared in person in support of this charade. This issue came to light when in January 11, 2023, 3 medical professionals reported medical inconsistencies in your story to the Eldridge Police Department. The Eldridge Police Department worked extensively with those medical professionals to discover inconsistencies with your story of you having cancer and leukemia. They investigated your social media posts, your interviews, your news stories, and other sources. Many medical inconsistencies were discovered. It was discovered that you had adopted or essentially parroted and used as your own other cancer patients' stories. Search warrants were applied for and granted, and your home was searched, and it was discovered that you had things to support your fake cancer claims, such as a wig, IV bags filled with cotton balls, feeding pumps, wound dressings, and other medical equipment. It's just hard for me to fathom what was going through your mind while you were making yourself up and using a fake IV or using to photograph yourself or fake bandages. It's hard to imagine what was going through your mind. After your arrest, to your credit, you were interviewed and admitted to not having cancer, not having a tumor that wrapped around your spine, and admitted to taking staged photographs of yourself to spread your story, and admitted to using other actual cancer patients' stories as pictures of you. You also admitted to receiving private donations that you would deposit in your checking account separate from the GoFundMe account. It is absolutely clear to the court that you engaged in a lengthy course of deceit. Today, you indicate, my initial reaction, quite frankly, was this lengthy course of deceit was motivated by greed or perhaps social media fame. I am not quite confident as I was walking in here that that is the case. But it is abundantly the case that this was not an isolated or momentary lapse in judgment. You were bold enough to be interviewed by the North Scott Press regarding your cancer. You frequently appeared on social media concerning your supposed cancer. You went so far as to speak to the National Pancreas Cancer Foundation. I understand you spoke to students and donors at St. Ambrose University. You spoke to actual cancer groups. You made many appearances, public and on social media, to push your fraudulent scheme. At any step along that way, you could have stopped. You could have stopped. It did not stop until you were caught. In sentencing you, I also have some concern regarding your tendency to divert blame to your family and your mother. I can accept the fact that your relationship with your mother and perhaps even your siblings was strained. I was not there. I do not know. However, I do not regard that as sufficient reason for, even if you did somehow think in a misguided effort to bring the family together, you were going to report that you had cancer. Okay, perhaps I could accept that as having happened. But to not, over a course of a year, to continue that charade and to actively promote it, not just remaining silent, but actively promoting on social media and through personal appearances, promoting yourself as a person with cancer. That is not a momentary lapse in judgment. Your attorney called an expert, Dr. Peitz, I believe, Peitz. I entirely agree with her conclusion that it is for the reasons I will get to in a moment, that you are a good candidate for probation. You are a good candidate not to reoffend. I accept that I doubt that you will ever commit a crime like this again. However, deterrence of others is a very important goal of the criminal justice system, and I will get to that in a moment. My discretion today in sentencing you is rather limited. You entered a plea agreement with the state whereby both parties, the state and the defendant, your counsel, recommend to the court that a suspended sentence for theft in the first degree be imposed. The concurrence of the court is a condition to that plea agreement. In other words, we wouldn't be here for sentencing today if the parties had not reached a plea agreement. So my decision here today is quite limited. My decision is to either accept the plea agreement or reject the plea agreement. While there is a very strong case can be made that the extent of your scheme requires incarceration, I can certainly appreciate the thoughts of the two women that testified in a very heartfelt way here today. I can certainly appreciate and understand their thoughts that the time in jail is appropriate. However, you have no prior criminal records. You were and are very young. You have been cooperative with the prosecution, and you agreed that at least the victims that directly donated to your campaign will be made whole by the restitution. You have also suffered a very real and substantial punishment of the local, national, and even international coverage of your crime. The court has determined that no further purpose would be served by rejecting the plea agreement and requiring the parties to take this case to trial, simply so the sentencing judge could have the option of placing you in prison, that would be the result if I did not suspend the sentences here today. So my decision is really down to choosing between a suspended sentence and a deferred judgment. Certainly I am bearing in mind again that you are very young, that you have no prior criminal history. For those of you in the audience that might not know what a deferred judgment is, it allows the court to defer making a decision on the appropriate sentence for a period of probation, typically 2 or 3 years. The defendant is placed on probation for that period of time. If the defendant successfully completes probation, probation and commits no other crimes and pays all the restitution ordered, at the end of 2 years, the charges against her would be dismissed without the entry of judgment. This would mean that Ms. Russo would not have a conviction for theft in the first degree on her criminal record. It would also mean that she retains various rights that she would lose with the felony conviction, such as the right to vote. But I am firmly convinced here today that it would not be remotely just to defer judgment in this case and allow you to proceed further in life without the consequence of this criminal conviction for theft on your record. You engaged in a continuing criminal scheme that lasted for a year that requires more serious punishment of that, and that will serve as a deterrent to both you and others similarly situated. Frankly, I think there is a good purpose served by having people with whom you will interact in the future know that at one time you engaged in this criminal scheme. Serious crimes must have serious consequences to deter both you and others from such crimes in the future. Granting a deferred judgment, in my mind, would send the wrong message to others out there that might be inclined to commit similar crimes. And I say that, I will add that I say that with all respect to Ms. Cunningham and the county attorney's office. She is a fine lawyer who is actually typically quite stern with her recommendations. And I know that her recommendation for a deferred judgment is not one that she made lightly. I, however, for the reasons expressed, have a different opinion. And I also, while much has been made about the fact that the restitution will be paid, yes, the people that directly contributed will receive restitution, a monetary restitution, which is, I believe, in the full amount. That is a wonderful thing. However, that does not compensate. The full restitution is not made because in my mind, the fact that this false claim was made and this lengthy false campaign took place causes other people around the country, not even in this community, to hesitate to donate to those seriously in need, thinking that it is all, it's likely a hoax or likely a fraud, or, oh, those people, it might be a scam. So this crime did not just affect those people who directly donated, but people out there who might be inclined to or hesitate to donate to other causes in the future. So for those reasons, I am not comfortable and will not grant a deferred judgment. Pursuant to the defendant's plea of guilty to the crime of theft in the first degree in violation of Iowa Code Section 714.11, 2, or 3, and 714 and 702.91, and pursuant to Section 902.3 and 902.9 of the Code, it is the judgment and sentence of the court that you be committed to the custody of the Iowa Department of Corrections for an indeterminate term of incarceration not to exceed 10 years, and you shall pay a fine of $1,370, which is not suspended. The Iowa Medical and Classification Center at Mitchellville, Iowa, is designated as the reception center to which the defendant shall be delivered by the sheriff. However, for good cause shown, the sentence just announced is suspended, and the defendant is placed on probation with the 7th Judicial District Department of Corrections for a period of 3 years. The terms of the probation will include that the defendant pay the restitution in full that the defendant commit no other crimes and that the defendant perform 100 hours of community service towards the community service volunteer work that is to be selected by the probation department. I was inclined to specifically name a charity or an organization, but that might arguably impose some burden on that organization as well, so I will not specify which organization. The defendant is ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $39,385.79, payable as indicated in the order filed in this case on July 12, 2023. The law presumes that the defendant has the reasonable ability to repay Category B costs. Category B costs are costs from the clerk of court and court-appointed attorney's fees. This is the clerk's, are the court costs in this matter, Ms. Cunningham, this indicates the court costs are $58,486.62. I cannot imagine that that is accurate.
No, Your Honor, I would not think that that's accurate at all, and I don't even know why that figure would be popping up.
I wonder if they somehow somehow included the restitution, or I don't know, but it's a shocking amount, and so I am not going to, I am going to defer further hearing on the amount of Category B restitution pending for 30 days, pending clarification of this. There will, Ms. Yeager, I believe you are privately retained?
That's correct, Your Honor.
Okay, so there will be no restitution for court-appointed attorney's fees.
Correct.
Other than appeal rights and bond, have I left anything out?
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
Ms. Russo, now that you've been sentenced, it's my duty to advise you of your appellate rights. Under the Iowa law, because your conviction and sentence was as the result of a plea of guilty, there is no automatic right to appeal. Rather, if you wish to appeal, you must establish good cause for your appeal, and you must file a request for permission to appeal within 30 days. If you wish to appeal and you cannot afford an attorney or a transcript of these proceedings for that purpose, you have the right to make application with the court for court-appointed appellate counsel and a transcript of these proceedings, all at the expense of the state of Iowa. Just be aware that that must be done within 30 days. Also, be aware that at the conclusion of the appeal, you may be ordered to make restitution or pay back court-appointed appellate attorney's fees and costs as well. Bond on appeal is set at $13,000 cash only. I believe that concludes this matter, other than, as I indicate, I would like clarification of court costs before I enter any decision concerning that. Thank you. That concludes this case.
Thank you, Your Honor.